when you're determining if the plan is sustainable, you really need to ask yourself three things. What would have to happen for this plan to be successful? So what would it look like on a day-to-day basis if I were to execute this perfectly? What does that look like? Like, actually be very clear. And like, I'm big on like I talk about a lot of abstract, I think, topics and conversation points and challenges with dieting. But like, I think we can gain a lot of insight. I think the answers are in being very clear and not just skipping over and being like, oh, it's going to be hard. No, how hard? What does hard even mean? Like, describe it. Walk me through your day. Walk yourself through your day. Like, okay, like the other thing, what would I have to give up in order to be adherent on this diet? So when we're talking about everything under like sustainability, you're going to make sacrifices. You know, in this example, it's okay, like, okay, I for sure am going to have to give up when I go out to eat, ordering whatever looks like, I mean, I guess I shouldn't even say whatever looks good, because some people might be like, no, like a fucking salad looks great. Like a boring salad that's only like 400 calories. Technically, it might look good, but I guess really what I should say is that what are you going to have to give up? You're going to have to give up the impulse to overeat at certain points, because in order to stay on track, in order to be adherent, that impulse is likely going to result in some aspect of non-adherence that will undo the deficit for the week. And I am not, some people, they kind of like give me shit. They're like, yo, if like one cheat meal is like, if that undoes like all your progress, like you have a problem. And I mean, like, I think for most people, it is so easy to convince themselves that one meal off track, I'm talking about like a real meal. I'm not telling you like, oh, like I went to Chipotle and I got like chicken and rice. That's like, okay, that's still trackable. I'm talking about truly you go out to dinner and like you have something that is like outrageously calorically dense. That can undo your deficit. So it's not just a matter of like, okay, what do you have to give up in the short term? It's a matter of what do you have to give up in the long term? What do you have to give up for several months? And really, like, be honest with yourself. Have you ever had to make this kind of adjustment? Like, to what degree, like, what is the magnitude of this sacrifice relative to what you've done previously? So I think like, if you take someone who, let's say like they played sports in high school, maybe they did like wrestling, or they've done some kind of competition where there were weight requirements and constraints. Yeah, that person might be very familiar with what it feels like to be very, very hungry. Maybe, perhaps. You take someone who, you know, their background, they're very acclimated to being uncomfortable for extended durations. Okay, that is someone that I would say generally, if that's you, you might not struggle nearly as much with these dietary restrictions, with being uncomfortable in the essence of being hungry, having to say no, even, I guess, even in the case if you're not hungry, just having to say no consistently. Not only like, what is your baseline? Like, what is the threshold in which you've had to make these sacrifices before, but how did it go? Like, I mean, like I've heard several stories of people, they're like, yeah, like I can be very uncomfortable for long periods of time, but I fly off the rails after that. Like, I've done these hyper restrictive diets. They always result in me like regaining the weight, if not more, every single time. And I mean, there's a close analogy here with like, or I guess this is closely tied to competing, because like, yeah, you great, you got to stage and like you were unbelievably lean and you were your leanest and you pushed past what you'd been previously. But the actual management of the body fat regain post, it wasn't great. So I mean, like, yeah, you get credit, you get like the star for like getting on stage and actually making it. I do think that you should be awarded like points in that aspect, but we shouldn't completely negate that, like, okay, in order to do that, it caused this massive compensation after the fact. And I think this is something that we really have to consider, and we have to factor into the degree of a deficit we're going to create, how rigid the diet's actually going to be, whether or not we should continue dieting for another 4, 5, 6 weeks. And last question, like, do you have the ability to actually see that out? Like these sacrifices, the things that you would have to do in order for this diet to be successful. I mean, like I talk about this a lot, like with prep. I think a lot of people, they assign blame to their circumstances. Like, I mean, it's fucked, but like their partner, their family, their job, and like it's good to be honest about like, okay, where are the stressors coming from? But like, I've gained a lot of insight having people open up and be like, no, it's like my partner makes this incredibly hard because of these reasons, because maybe they're not into the lifestyle. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they intentionally, unintentionally, hopefully unintentionally, just make the process of dieting more challenging. Okay, the exposure like to kids, like it's not really something like you can just be like, okay, I'm not going to take care of my kids for these 3 to 4 months. Like that's insane. Your job, like having like specific requirements, whether that's going into the office or just having unexpected responsibilities that will arise. Like, I mean, some people, they really do put themselves into a position where it's like, in order for that diet, that prep to be truly successful at a baseline, not like exceeding expectations, but just a baseline. Once we start sifting through what the stressors are, what the things that impose the most on adherence, it becomes very clear, like, okay, the only way that this diet would be successful is if you were in a completely different scenario than you're currently in. Like the current situation, your setup is not conducive with this specific diet being successful. Like you actually can't make these sacrifices. So if we know that out the gate, okay, as a coach, that tells me this might be optimal. This might be the fastest of tracks, but frankly, it's not practical. Like there's no way this would work in theory, but given your circumstances, this isn't the best plan for you.